Hi everyone. So my name is Andrea, and I'm super excited to be kickstarting our interview series. And so today I have a very special guest, Laura Reinholz, and she is the BMO for Women director, and she's also my mentor. So I'm super glad that she agreed to come on Zoom and have an honest conversation with me about gender equality in the workplace and her personal involvement in women initiatives. And so without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to Laura so she can introduce herself and also tell us a little bit about her background.
Thanks, Andrea, and thank you for inviting me to be part of the inaugural video interviews. You introduced me, Laura Reinholz, Director of BMO for Women. I lead the program within BMO that's focused on making us a better financial institution for women as clients and customers of the bank. And really what that involves is leading a team of people who have different initiatives that are really looking to financially empower women, whether they're women entrepreneurs or women investors. And I like to say that for the last 5 years, we've been on a mission to reduce the barriers for women when it comes to their personal, professional, business, and financial lives. And what that involves is a number of different programs and so on. And I know that you plan on asking me more details later on what we actually do, so I won't go into details now. But really, at the heart of it, it's reducing barriers for women in their financial lives.
Could you also kind of tell us a little bit about, what led you to pursue this role and kind of like leading up to your position at BMO for Women?
Sure. So I started out my career client-facing in really in my career in the financial services industry. I started out as a sales assistant with Merrill Lynch Canada. So I supported 3 advisors, and I had the ambition to become an advisor myself. And I eventually did about 4 years later. And for about 8 years, I advised clients on their investments, and I was a financial planner as well. And then in 2009, after handling clients' portfolios through the subprime mortgage crisis and so on, I was feeling really burnt out. And so I actually packed up my condo in Victoria and went traveling for almost a year. So I backpacked mostly through Southeast Asia, and then went through Egypt, Jordan, and then came back into Canada. And I realized when I came back to Victoria that I couldn't live in such a small city anymore after being, I spent 2 months in Bangkok, which is a vibrant, busy, beautiful city. And so I made the decision to look for a job in Toronto. And luckily, I maintained a really good relationship with my past leader at BMO, and he helped me find a role here in head office at Bank of Montreal in Toronto. At the same time, I was also working on my MBA through a remote learning program with the University of Liverpool. And for a couple of years, I was doing that while working full time and then progressing my career. And I moved into program management roles. So that was really looking at initiatives to make life easier for the people that face clients within the organization. And I'd made the decision to move over to Manulife to take on a big stretch role, which was managing the technology strategy for Salesforce.com, which again, stretch role because I really didn't have a background in technology or anything, but I did know I had a background in sales. And as I was working on that, I started realizing I have a really deep interest in what makes people tick. Like when you think about customer experience and consumer behaviors and why people decide to buy things or choose certain organizations, there's a lot of psychology behind that. So I moved into a customer experience role, and that was really trying to understand what would make us a better organization to support the advisors that sold the products that we had. And through all of this, I was doing a lot with respect to women and girls. But so I was a big sister with big brothers and sisters back in Victoria. Most of my volunteering involved working with girls or women, and same with my donations and philanthropy and so on. And I was also on the Manulife ERG, their Women's Alliance. And when I saw the role at BMO come up, it was like a perfect combination of all of my work experience and what I was doing sort of as a passion in my personal life. So that's what led me to here, and I've been in the role for almost 5 years.
So speaking of, BMO for Women, can you tell us a little bit about, what the BMO for Women program is all about, and, the different initiatives that you're involved with the BMO for Women program?
Sure. So I view it as multiple pillars within the program. So the first pillar is research and thought leadership and advocacy. So within that, some of the examples of the things that we've worked on, we partnered with Carleton University and the Beacon Agency on 2 research papers on women entrepreneurs. One was focused on their appetite for risk and the other on how they innovate. And through that work, when the federal government in 2018 announced their women entrepreneurship strategy in their federal budget, some of the work that we did was actually used to inform their decision making with that announcement. So that's what I mean by advocacy, because some of the work that we do has the ability to actually change policy that makes Canada as a whole better for women business owners. Within that same group of advocacy and thought leadership, we've also done things like sponsored the Women Deliver conference in Vancouver in 2019. It's the world's largest gender equality conference, and we were the first and only bank to actually ever come on as a major sponsor there. And we held a side event there talking about how women are doing things to address, like, they're coming up with local solutions that have a global impact. And it's really focusing on how women are addressing things like climate change and creating sustainable businesses and so on. So that's that pillar. The other one is almost like a traditional marketing pillar. So we have BMOforwomen.com, we have the podcast Boulder, we create a lot of content. We partner with a lot of women-owned businesses to create the content. So we really do try to walk the talk and actually use women-owned businesses for almost everything we do within the program. And then we also have an educational component, and that's kind of split out. So there's the education of our frontline employees. So we created 2 learning modules to help them have better conversations with their women clients. And then there's also the education and workshops for women clients. So we hold a lot of, especially in the last year with COVID hitting business owners so deeply, we've been holding a lot of workshops for women business owners to help them almost refocus or pivot their business a little bit. And then we also have our Celebrating Women program, which is we've iterated that to become a grant program. And last year we did that coming out of COVID, or in the midst of COVID, I guess, not coming out of it, we're still in it. And the grants were given to women who had demonstrated how they innovated their businesses to continue being able to drive revenue during the pandemic. And this year we're going to be expanding it into the US as well as keeping it in Canada. And we'll be focused on women-owned businesses who have a sustainability aspect. So that's kind of a summary. It's by no means exhaustive, but that's a bit of a summary on some of the work that we do.
Yeah, no, I think that's like a great way to like frame all your initiatives, like with 3 pillars, because it sounds like you guys are doing a lot. And I want to talk a little bit about, COVID's impact on, women and women-owned businesses like later on. But I think I want to go back to, like, obviously it sounds like you guys have a lot of initiatives, within your program. So, and I don't think if I'm not mistaken, I don't think a lot of banks have dedicated, women's program. So why do you think it's important to have a dedicated women's program at a bank like BMO does?
I do know some of our competitors do have one now. We were the first, so we started ours 5.5 years ago, and that's when there was a lot of people doing a lot of work across the organization, and then they realized that they needed a dedicated program to manage it all. A couple of the other banks have come on and created a model similar, and we don't all look the same, but we have done it. And it's very much in largely because we know that, like, for example, 80% of women in Canada who are in like a relationship with a man, so
Hmm.
um, that have been surveyed have said that they would leave their advisor if their spouse were to die, because advisors, again,
Right.
the industry is still very skewed towards men being in advisory
Yeah.
roles. It's remained flat for 22 years. I think the total percentage of women who are advisors in Canada is 18%. And
Oh,
so
wow.
this is why, as a sidebar, this is why I love what you're doing with this club, because
Yeah.
you're encouraging young women who don't necessarily have a business degree or in a business program to consider roles in our industry. And we need people who are looking at like psychology degrees and so on, because you just need to want to have like relationships with
Hmm.
people to be able to advise them on their money. Sorry, that was a sidebar, but I think that's part of the challenge in
Hmm.
why we needed to start focusing on women as clients, because they were getting, I want to say, left behind in the advice world, because they weren't connecting with the advisor, because the advisor always defaulted to speaking to their spouse. And
Right.
then on the women-owned business side, like, there's all kinds of research out there that show us how little women-owned businesses get from venture capital and private equity firms, how hard it
Hmm.
is, what they face when it comes to biases and stereotypes, when it comes to getting lending from financial institutions. Um, Even, and then when you start looking, like doing a further drop down in the women entrepreneur world and start looking at Black women entrepreneurs and Indigenous women entrepreneurs, they face additional issues like racism and so on. And it can be cloaked, but there are still biases and stereotypes that they face.
Hmm.
And so that's a lot of the work that we're trying to do, is to make sure that we're not perpetuating that. And then also looking at how we can create programs to be able to support them in growing and scaling their businesses.
Yeah. So, hearing you, say these figures about how, 18% of financial advisors are women, and, the low percentage of venture capital or private equity funding that goes to women-owned businesses. What do you think about the current landscape surrounding what, like, gender equality in the workplace, or just women in business and female entrepreneurs in general, as of 2021, especially with COVID hitting as well?
So the scary data, there's a lot of scary data when it comes to women in the workplace as well as women business owners, because a lot of women-owned businesses are in the industries that have been hit the hardest and
Right.
continue to be hit really hard here in Ontario. Like, uh,
Hmm.
there's a lot of personal care businesses that are owned and run by women. And I mean, I think our personal care businesses have been closed in Ontario for probably the better, like, for more than half a year. If you add up
Right.
cumulatively all of the lockdowns and so on, um, they're in hospitality, travel.
Hmm.
When you start adding up all of these different industries, you can see where these women are struggling to keep their businesses afloat, because um, they're not driving revenue. They're in
Right.
retail. Again, and I'm speaking from being, located in downtown Toronto, which has
Hmm.
been probably one of the worst areas to be as a business owner. And because of the industries that have been impacted, these are the women that are also being significantly impacted. But then
Yeah.
on the flip side, there's also some really great stories. Like, we have one of our grant recipients, Pam Fanjoy. She had a restaurant in a small town village in
Mhm.
out near Guelph, and she pivoted her business um, to do online cooking schools and gourmet takeout and so on. And she's also pivoted it to be a lot more focused on sustainability. And she's aligned her business now to a couple of the sustainable development goals. They do cooking lessons for at-risk youth and their
Mhm.
families. And so, because she also has a social work background as well as being a chef. And so when you start looking
Right.
at how because women are incredibly innovative and tenacious, they also do really interesting things when facing adversity. And so I'm starting to see
Mhm.
a lot of these stories coming out now. And so it's making me feel a little bit more positive, amidst all of the negative. On the flip side with the workforce, some of the information that's coming out, there's a couple of cohorts that have been, I would say, falling out of the workforce or opting out of the workforce in the last year. And there's women in their early 20s who are really new to their careers at early mid 20s, and then women in their late 30s who are mid-career, kind of hitting their stride as far as their earning potential.
Right.
And when we start looking at the reasons why they're coming out of the workforce, we really need our governments to be doing more, I think, when it comes to childcare. I saw somebody, Paulina Cameron from the Forum in Vancouver. They're a group that advocates for women entrepreneurs. I saw something yesterday. She was like, we allow business owners to, from a tax perspective, write off entertainment expenses and so on. Why aren't we allowing them to do the same with childcare? And so the demands that are being put on women who have young children right now, having to work in your four walls, be on for something, something like this, and then just outside your door you have your 6-year-old child, needing help with school. And so you were seeing a lot of stress and anxiety coming out of that lack of work-life balance. And there's a lot of organizations that aren't supporting women in the way that they should be through all of this for as far as work-life balance.
And so what do you think, so obviously there's so much that needs to be done, but on a more positive note, how do you see current environment changing for women? And I know this is like a really broad topic, like there's so many areas within, women in business and women in finance, whether that's like, in the workplace or, as we mentioned with women business owners. Within these topics, what do you see improving, and has there been any improvement whatsoever?
I don't know that there's been much improvement over the last year, and I'm hoping we'll start to see. I actually think that we've been brought back. This has been in a lot of different news articles and so on, but there is a lot of concern that women have been set back about 20 years with respect to gender equality in the workforce and so on because of what's happening right now. I'm hoping that enough organizations like ours and some of our peers on the street are taking it seriously and really looking at what they can be doing to make sure that women aren't opting out or leaving, or and how they can be supporting them better into the future, as well as getting more young women into roles with us. And I know that there is a lot of work underway within our HR and diversity and inclusion teams to be doing that. It's just, and same with our wellness team. We actually have somebody in HR who's responsible for wellness and mental health.
Oh, wow.
And they've been working hard on creating resources for BMO employees to be able to access if they need it. Sorry, that was not a very cheery answer, but I'm still. It's like I'm still waiting to see, because the pandemic's not over, and we're in a pretty pivotal spot with respect to that right now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, it's an honest answer, and I appreciate that. In light of what's happening now, I think your answer was probably, on point. And so I was also wondering, with the BMO for Women program, and how do you kind of track the success of your initiatives, or like how do you yourself track initiatives you've done, and what the impact was from that?
So there's a few different ways that we do, like through our program specifically. So we do track within our business banking world. Every quarter, we look at what our loan growth has been for women business owners, the number of clients, and that's just to be able to check to make sure that we're going in the right direction. Because by growth in our loan book, it means that or our client book, it means that we're doing something right with respect to the program. The other thing we're tracking, in 2018, we announced $3 billion in capital for women-owned businesses over 3 years. And we track where we are against that $3 billion every quarter as well. Some of the other things that we track, so for example, with our grant program, we're in the middle right now of working with a writer to be able to create an impact report on the 10 recipients of our grants. And I say impact report because I want to know, like, I'm not fussed about how they spent the money that was given to them. I really would like to know how it impacted their business in a positive way, whether it meant that they were able to keep employees on, which meant that, you know, it impacted employment numbers positively, whether they were to hire new employees, whether they were able to, you know, and if it simply meant that they had to they used it to pay their rent to keep their lights on and actually generate revenue over that period of time, again, we still made a positive impact on that business. And so that's one of the things that I'm looking for, is how did we impact that business? Was it in, you know, increased revenue? Was it in employment numbers? Were they able to do something innovative and, you know, do something, embed a new process into their business that made them more efficient? Like those are all good. That's all impact on the business. And so when you flip your measurement around a little bit, so it's not necessarily, I want to say, quantitative, it's more qualitative. And so I look at it in both ways in that respect. Capital Markets recently issued a $750 million Women in Business bond. And they will create an impact report out of that as well to show what the impact was out of issuing that bond. And so that's the way we tend to be looking at things now too, is how did we make an impact?
Yeah, and like going back to what you said about how you plan to be publishing these impact reports based on the grants that you guys gave to different women-owned businesses, how you specify that you don't necessarily care about how they use the money that you gave them, rather than, you know, the impact. Because I think a lot of times, like for example, in my experience, you know, in venture capital, they only care about your use of proceeds and like what you're, you know, using them, what you're spending the money on, which I know, you know, venture capital funding and grants are very different, but I think honestly, the impact side is so much more useful in measuring, you know, what was done with that money and how useful that was, and how good the business was at utilizing that money. And so I think you highlighted something that was really important. Now I want to kind of pivot to your personal involvement in different initiatives. I know, you know, through our conversations that you're involved in a lot of things outside of BMO, like Grow Your Biz and like SheO and Fembot. So I was wondering if you could kind of tell us a bit about those initiatives and how you're involved with that.
Sure. So with Grow Your Biz, I actually represent BMO on their executive advisory board. So BMO was a founding partner of theirs back when Barbara Mowat founded Grow Your Biz, and so ever since they ever since the organization existed, BMO has had somebody on their executive advisory board to represent us. Really, what we do, you know, meet quarterly, and she gives us an update on the organization, and that's usually when she seeks advice or guidance on different things that she's working on. And she likes to use the strategic partner group for some of that advice as well, just because she wants to make sure that we're comfortable with different things that are happening. Through that relationship, we got involved with the We Empower Challenge, which is a UN Sustainable Development Goal challenge that's globally for women-owned businesses. And it's taken me to New York to go to the UN during the General Assembly and meet some incredible, like, inspiring people from around the world through different organizations and so on. And so through all of that, I've been able to evolve our program at the bank a little bit differently and focused, you know, in that sustainability space. And with Fembot, I'm a member of the board, and again, it's you're really providing guidance and so on, looking for ways to help them grow their membership. I've referred people to them. I do that with Grow Your Biz as well. Like I try to, if women-owned businesses are looking for a certain ecosystem of support, I refer them to the different organizations. You tend to, and this is for both of those organizations, you tend to help them with different, like if they're looking to help with fundraising or what have you, organizing conferences or events. I've moderated panels with Fembot and Grow Your Biz, and so like those are different ways of personal involvement for me. With SheEO, I'm an activator, and what that means is an activator is the person who is one of the many women who come together, and it's almost like angel investing, get much smaller scale. So for $1,000 a year, it goes into a pool. Women-owned businesses apply for interest-free loans through that pool, and the applications get processed through SheEO, and then they send out the applications to the group of activators. So there's usually around 500 of us, and we vote for who we want to get down to the top 25. And then the next round of then the top 25 get sent out to the activators again, and then we vote on which ones we think should receive funding. And it's creating a new system of financing for women, because what we're doing through that is removing that barrier in access to capital, really, because what's fascinating about the decision-making process with SheEO is, like, I come from a banking background. I used to do lending. I don't look at the finances when I'm voting. I watch the video and I read their application, but I don't look at their financials or their projections, because what happens is my banking mind gets turned on, and then I start picking apart, like, well, is this realistic? And I would rather go with my heart and how much I believe in this product or service or a business owner. And so, and I think that a lot of people do that. And because we're not doing the lending in the old traditional way, you're creating a whole new system of access to capital. And I love the process of it. And the business owners are also all doing something to address the sustainable development goals. So if you think about the importance of this, especially as we're aiming for a net zero future, and if anything that this last year has taught us, among the many things, is that as climate change gets worse, it's going to be COVID times 100 or times 1,000, especially in certain regions of the world. So we really need to start focusing on better solutions. And women-owned businesses are trying to create better solutions.
Yeah. And on that topic of, sustainability and climate change, I know that you are currently pursuing a graduate program here at U of T, which is involving ESG and sustainability. So I was wondering if you could talk about why you're pursuing that program.
So the reason I got into wanting to take the education in that direction, for the last 5 years, I've been very embedded in the S in the ESG, which is social, with the gender equality and diversity and so on. And I wanted to learn more, like take myself up on a more macro scale, and look at and learn more about the other, like the environmental piece and so on. But what my catalyst was for deciding to do this was the first time I went to New York in 2018 for the We Empower Challenge, and going to the UN and hearing from all of these amazing women in the world, and learning just how gender equality and climate change are very interconnected. In the book Drawdown, in the top 10 most impactful actions that you could take to address climate change, women and girls are 2 of the top 10 actions, like that they're heavily involved in that. On a global scale, women make up a very large percentage of those living in poverty. And they also live in regions that are already have been and will be even more so impacted by massive climate events. And so even though I'm coming up on a macro level, the more I'm learning about it all, it's so interconnected, and we need to be doing more. And really, that was the catalyst for me to go into that program, is to learn more and learn more from an academic perspective. But then, how can I be doing things differently in my personal life? How can I be doing things differently in my work life? What learnings can I bring into this program to make the world better for the women who are impacted or doing things to address climate change? So, yeah.
Great. And to close off, since I think we've been going for about 35 minutes, as a woman in business, and then you worked in directly in finance as a financial advisor and in banking before, is there a piece of advice or any encouragement that you can give, female students here at U of T, whether they're wanting to pursue a career in finance but are a bit intimidated or aren't too sure?
Don't be discouraged. There are so many resources at your disposal when you come into an organization to learn. Like, connect in with people that are in the industry, ask questions, network, but don't be discouraged, because I was terrible at math in high school, terrible, because I couldn't, like with algebra and so on, it just didn't make sense to me for real life. But when it came to financial math and accounting and financial statements, because what you're calculating for, or what you're looking at, makes sense from it makes sense from a practical perspective, and it's being applied to an actual business or investments and so on. And I think that sometimes when I've had conversation, it's actually the financial piece that people are intimidated by. But the best advisors that I've encountered are the ones that really care about people and connections and relationships and helping people meet their goals. And then they have all of the tools and programs and so on at their disposal to make the right recommendations for people. And so I would say, and don't automatically, I started my career in a support role, and that's what a lot of women do. Like, when you look at the numbers, there's a lot of women as assistants and associates. Go for the rookie program to be an advisor off right away. Just look for the opportunities in capital markets to be on the sales side, not just the analyst side. Like, it's very much a relationship business, even today in today's computer and virtual world. It's very relationship based. And if you care about and have an interest in people, you'll do well.
Yeah, I think it's
that was very long-winded, but
no, that's good, because I think when I talk to a lot of friends who are thinking about whether they should pursue a career in finance, they're always like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm good enough, like, math is not their strong suit. So it's really encouraging to hear you say that, at the end of the day, finance and banking is a relationship business, and it's about connecting with your clients or your colleagues. So I definitely think what you said is really relatable and also very true. But with that, I think that concludes this interview, and I really want to thank you, Laura, for coming on and agreeing to chat with me. I know you're super busy, and I think everyone wants to have a chat with you. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.